Hi, my name is Fasika, and welcome to an episode of Say It Loud. Today with our panel, we're going to be discussing interracial relationships. So dating, relationships, and marriage, it's all pretty tough to navigate. But throwing being black and African into the mix, and you've got all sorts of dilemmas, stereotypes, and taboos to deal with. Although this is the 21st century, and by law we can marry and date whomever we want, interracial relationships still come with a slew of politics. Some black people feel like other races avoid pursuing them due to their ethnicity, whilst many others feel fetishized by people with jungle fever being enticed by their skin color. And from our perspective, is choosing to date outside of our race just us expanding our horizons, or is it a symptom of deeply rooted self-hatred? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing today with our panel. On my right here, I have Shola, and I've got the beautiful Idil. We've got Vanessa. We've got Ring, Kaiya, and Chris on the far left. Chris, I'd like to start with you. You're a mixed race person. Do you think that that has impacted the way that you view interracial relationships?
Yes, definitely. My father's black, my mum's white, and I have a neutral opinion because of that.
Fair enough. So you said your father's black and your mother's white.
Yep.
Do you feel that you're more inclined to date people of black heritage or white heritage?
Well, it is predominantly white, only because of the social scene and the social life that I sort of surround myself with.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Kaiya, what do you think about interracial relationships? Are you for it, against it, neutral?
I think interracial relationships is a good barometer of race relations in a society. So I think if you look at interracial relationships, you can examine it from a number of ways. Some people use it as a way to have upward social mobility.
Right.
I think interracial relationships and preferences is a very interesting thing. So I'm neutral.
Neutral.
Yeah.
Right. Vanessa, what about you? Do you share Kaiya's sentiments about interracial relationships?
Probably opposite. I feel like interracial dating, or dating outside your race, I should say, for black women is sensitive.
Right.
For me, I think there's a shortage of black men. So when I see maybe a white girl with a black guy, it's just kind of like, oh, that's one less person to choose from.
Right.
And I also feel like black women are really loyal to their men.
Right.
And you're more than likely to see a black man dating outside their race than a black woman. And I also feel like when black guys date other black women, there's this high standards, like they have to have good ass, good breasts, perfect skin, perfect features. But whenever they're dating like white girls, they're usually, ordinary, to say the least. There's no real wow factor. They're just like everyday girls.
Fair enough.
So I wouldn't say I'm for it.
Yep.
But I'm not completely against it at the same time.
Right. Shola, I'd like to ask you about what the dating scene is like for you as a young black man in Australia.
Yeah, sure. Well, coming from the perspective of a young black man dating in Australia, I guess, it's a bit difficult because there is kind of that cliche about, being a black man. I guess, black people in popular culture, there's kind of like this hypersexualization of the black men and the black women. The black women, they got all of that, and the black man got all of that. And then, and so there's kind of that stereotype, and it kind of does pop up a lot, like not even just from girls, like guys are kind of like, not, trying to pursue anything, but like just like say it in a passing comment. It's kind of one of those things that you think is funny and then you brush off, but it's still a stigma that kind of follows you around, and you kind of do see it in the dating scene. And then on top of that, just from what Vanessa just said, there is kind of that ever watchful eye of the black woman that's on you, and like it is, and it kind of does come into play as well, because it's like you kind of feel like there is a restriction on kind of what you are free to do, because there is that criticism of like, if I'm walking down the street and I'm walking with a white girl and we're having a nice time and we're holding hands, and then you see a black girl at the side and you're like, I know exactly what she's thinking. I know exactly what she's thinking, and I need to leave right now. So.
But I think, to draw on like what both of you said, I think there is a gendered dynamic. Men have historically been free to have the power within a relationship. And so that's why it's so easy for men, black men in particular, to pick and choose how they feel and not feel the same social pressure or stigma attached to their dating preferences. I totally agree with you.
And I think it also ties to what you said before about being the upward social mobility. Some of the black men were being with this woman because they wanted to climb up higher, and it was about being status issue and even a low self-esteem as well. I'm gonna be accepted, more. I think there's that.
Just to interject a little bit briefly, I know that the whole dating thing has been strictly tied to a guy having this freedom to date as they wish. But let us not forget, we live in a liberal democratic country where people have the right to choose whoever they want to associate themselves with. So that also does really exist. People, our sisters today in Australia perhaps, they do have more options, whomever they want to choose to date. But again, people restrict themselves for many reasons not to date others.
Right.
I disagree.
You disagree?
Yeah, I don't think black women have that choice. We might have a liberal, democratic
But then,
illusion.
but then, in what way do you think that your choice is more restricted than ours in this situation? Because you're saying that there's that there's a stigmatism and that black women are restricted. But just from what you guys have been saying, it's just demonstrating that there is a restriction. There's a stigmatism around what we're doing as well.
No,
People will see a black guy with a white girl, and they'll have that judgment, or they'll be like, he might be with her for social standing. He might just be trying to work up through the
Black women
ethnic
also have
range.
stigma
I'm talking
surrounded around them.
Yeah,
I'm
But
talking
I'm saying
about
that
statistics, though. Statistically, you can measure the nature of race relations by interracial marriages and relationships, and it's well known that black women
3 times more.
are right at the bottom of those measures, right? So
But
look
what
at
are
it.
the measures though? Like
Measures,
what
measures
are we
measures
talking
of
about?
desirability
Exactly.
as a female, black women are on the bottom of the list. Even though they're hypersexualized, you will much more likely see a lot of other races marrying black men, for example. But that does not happen.
Yeah.
It's not the same for black women. So, and their own kind, are, marrying outside. So I think that's some of the frustrations that are coming from black women, because some of them are incarcerated, and then what happens to the, black family and black units? That the shortage that Vanessa was talking about is very real for black women.
But then does that insert like just an automatic
It's not
kind
an
of responsibility on the black man that we're supposed to, that we're supposed to, uphold the social structure? And I'm not saying that, that this isn't the case. Like it could very well be the case, but you kind of see that, by being a black man dating outside of his race, there is a criticism that's like, well, look, all the other black men are in jail, or, all the other black men are gay, and then you're running off with a white woman, and, what is this? But I'm dead serious, and it's like, well, what is this doing to your community? And you can understand, like, in terms of self-esteem, in terms of kind of, just being in that scene, kind of having to navigate all that criticism.
Hi, I'm Abdullahi, and today I'm taking Say It Loud to the streets to see what people think about interracial relationships. Do you have a preference in terms of who you date racially?
I don't have a preference, but there are some races, not some races, but there are certain, I guess you're attracted to certain people or whatnot, you have your own preferences, but in terms of race, I don't discriminate, I guess.
So what are those preferences that you're more attracted to?
Oh, number one on my list in terms of being with a partner would be someone that's culturally aware. I wouldn't want someone that finds, something that I would teach them from my culture weird or unusual. They would understand it as that's what Ghanaians do or whatnot. They wouldn't say, oh, that's kind of strange. They would accept it and kind of assimilate into it. Yeah.
So Sana, how would your parents feel if you brought home another type of African from outside of Ethiopia?
I think the short answer would be that they would have an issue with it or have trouble accepting it. But I think in that particular instance, religion would supersede race. I feel like it would be easier for them to accept someone from the same faith because I feel like that's where a lot of their core beliefs and their values lie. And even looking at it from a perspective of, like, our parents come to this country and they feel so far removed from their people and from back home that I find that it's harder for them to adjust, and a lot of times their religion and their culture is what they hold on to the most. And even personally speaking, I think growing up in a relatively conservative Habesha household, they're quite resistant to change. But I feel like ultimately it comes down to your happiness and whether you're willing to compromise your happiness. I feel like for me, compromising my happiness for my family's happiness is not healthy and it's not productive. And I think that ultimately it would be a decision that I would have to make, and whether I'm willing to, I guess, cross those boundaries for my own happiness. And I feel like if the time did ever come where I was put in that situation, it would be knowingly, and it would be a conversation that I would have to have with my partner, my family, and God, I guess.
Your answer kind of applies to all cultures in terms of like, would you marry outside of Ethiopian race or Eritrean race at all? In terms of other black Africans, say someone like Nigerian, Ghanaian, do you feel like they'd have a problem with that specifically? Like, do you feel like there's kinds of like anti-blackness in our community?
I think there's anti-blackness in almost every community. I think yes, but I think that also the culture shock is what would be huge for them. I feel like with being Habesha, there's a lot of preservation, like in our culture and in our religion. So I feel like it would be really hard for them to kind of step outside their comfort zone and accept that. And I definitely feel like anti-blackness is a conversation that needs to be had in a lot of communities. Yeah.
So Eric, do you feel comfortable talking about sex with your parents?
No, not at all.
Why not?
It's just a mix of things. It's mainly got to do with faith and just cultural upbringing. It's just never been something that's really been openly discussed. It's always been something that's kind of like a taboo type of topic. Even though my parents are pretty open with a lot of things, I just never felt comfortable having that conversation with them about any sexual related topics.
You mentioned faith and culture. What is it about African culture that makes sex such a taboo topic?
I think it's kind of intertwined with our faith as well. So the fact that predominantly we're either Christian-based faith or Muslim-based faith, they've got pretty strict views on the whole sexual relations and topics. So that's kind of what makes it hard and a bit difficult to have open dialogue, and that's why you see there's so many sexual questions and issues that arise because of that as well. So yeah.
Do you feel like this is something that needs to change, or are you fine just like not talking to your parents about sex at all?
I think definitely it's something that needs to change. It, with dialogue, with greater dialogue and discussions, there's a greater chance for progress and just more open discussions and people becoming better aware and having better practices, safe practices as well.
So Chris, when we're talking about interracial relationships, a lot of the times black people feel like they won't want to date within their race because of stereotypes. So things like black girls have too much attitude. Have you ever heard any of these statements being told to any black people?
Personally, no, but I do know they do circle. But I mean, predominantly from my experience, I grew up in a predominantly white culture. A lot of white girls in my school growing up all the way through, and so I've always been accustomed to white women.
Yeah.
And it's not a preference per se, but it's just what is around predominantly all the time. So it's one that it might seem that I favour, but I mean, because I do, like black women. But yeah.
Would you date a black woman?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
It's just that you don't get to meet them just because of your social
Well, that's
circles.
exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Yeah.
All my social circles, everything is predominantly white. Not necessarily by preference, but just how it is.
Fair enough.
Have
Yeah.
you ever gone on a mission to find?
No, it's a good question.
But have you actually ever
No.
embarked on ever gone through the critical assessment, self-assessment, and been like, maybe I should go and I don't know. Have you ever?
I've never, but it's...
It's a little bit of a contrived process to be like, I think I want to try a black.
Well, I do that because I grew up in a predominantly white environment, and I'm always thinking, I need to go to America or London because there's just no one here for me.
I'm the same.
So
I was like,
it's a legitimate
I really want to
question,
know because
yeah.
I've never dated a person of African or black background. I'm like, I really want to know what it feels like. Would it be different?
It's normal.
Experience.
Wow.
So Vanessa, you were talking about the whole black man and white woman couple earlier. Do you feel that pop culture figures like Kim Kardashian or the Kardashians in general have made dating black men a trend?
As disturbing as the Kardashians and their fetish for black men is, they've definitely made it a trend.
Right.
Openly worshipping black men is a thing right now.
Yep.
And they've definitely assisted in highlighting and exaggerating the stigmas and stereotypes that surround black men, whether, it's their big asset or their natural masculine nature. I recall Khloe Kardashian saying that she only dates black guys and has never been sexual with a white guy. And I think it's important to recognize that if you're over-focusing on physical traits, then that is fetishizing.
Yeah.
And the difference between preference and fetishization. If you happen to only date black guys by chance, then maybe that's preference.
Yeah.
But if you're actively seeking or avoiding someone on the foundation of skin color, then I think you need to reevaluate some things in your life. But they've definitely made it cool again. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It shouldn't take someone like the Kardashians to make it cool, but they've definitely made
Sorry,
it cool.
I'm going to have to be a bit of an asshole and disagree again.
Disagree.
I'm going to have to disagree because I think there is a really fine line between just sexual preference and fetishism. Fetishism is a very strong term to kind of to assign to the whole thing. And I mean, I guess if you have a sexual preference, you seek people that fit within your sexual preference. I think that's just a natural way that kind of human beings kind of find their partners. You have the kind of idea in your head of what you like, and therefore you go and seek it. So
you don't find it weird if someone says like they only exclusively date black men? You don't find that weird?
Well, it would depend on the circumstances. I mean, I would have to delve in a little bit deeper and actually understand, sit down and interview them and ask them, you know, why? Like, what are the reasons for it? And if it's purely just because of the thing of like, because I think black guys are hot, then that's just a sexual preference. And then people are free to pursue those sexual preferences really without criticism, unless there's, you know, obviously some type of negative connotation attached to it. But I think we should be careful when we're actually, you know, using the term fetishism, because it's a very it has, you know, very, very serious implications. Yeah.
Ring, what about you? Have you had any experiences with racial fetishization as a black man?
Absolutely, I had an experience. Fetishization is something that quite pervasive in Australia. When I got to Australia, basically, and finishing my high school, I've been through that, but also it's coupled with stereotyping as well. So I would turn up to an all-white dance nightclub, perhaps, and then you would have people that would have that perception that actually you'd be having a lot of women want to date you at that time, and this has been an issue all along. But if I may share a little bit, the encounter that I had, basically, it was at work. I was working, and basically white women have just approached me in many different angles, and basically she was talking about my physiques and things, and for whatsoever, we ended up in a bed together. So basically, I thought the whole thing was a joke, and it's something that we just wither off. She was a boss, so I took it by the chin, basically. But the whole issue become more unacceptable.
Did you get fired afterwards?
Yes, I did get fired, unfortunately. But before that, basically,
Dude, that's sexual harassment.
It was quite difficult. It was quite difficult. You can't win that case. So basically, it's gotten into the situation where it becomes difficult to bear. So, and then she started talking about how if we ended up being together, or perhaps getting married, we have a kid with a blue eye and curly hair and this fair skin, my kids be more beautiful, be more acceptable into this community. And I was just like, hello, wait a minute, get off my dick for me.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for in today's episode. We encourage you to keep the conversation going by using the Say It Loud hashtag on Twitter, and make sure to follow us on all our social media at Say It Loud Show. I'd like to thank all of my panelists, and this has been one episode of Say It Loud. We hope to see you next time.